We haven't done anything yet. Okay.
Haven't done it.
Order.
I'm gonna give you
Call
this.
for verification, sorry. Verification, okay?
Yep, we posted on Friday at 3 o'clock.
Okay, roll call.
Brophy,
Yes.
Kaczynski,
Yes.
Bowles,
Yes.
Schaefer, here, Kraus,
Yes.
Profar.
Here.
Here.
Okay, any agenda changes, corrections?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, approval of the minutes?
We got the regular minutes from the October 13th board meeting. Figured might as well. We'll get those passed since we're here. Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved in second, all in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. And we're on to public comments, we have none. New business, discussion, possible action on repealing or rewriting village dispenser ordinance, chapter 295, sex offender residency restriction.
So I did want to take through this a little step by step so that everybody understands what's going on here. And it's all out in the open. Basically, back in we had a sex offender registry ordinance all the way back going to 1993. But in 2017, when I was here, I remember there being a kind of a wave that went through the state where a lot of communities were redoing their sex offender residency requirements to basically make it more restrictive for those in the registry to find places to live in a community. And Spencer did the same thing. We basically increased the areas associated with where they can't live to 1,500 feet radiuses around a lot of places like schools, parks, daycares, churches, those types of things.
Name, I remember doing that.
Yep. Yeah, I was here too. I remember I was in the audience at that point in time, but I remember. So we set that distance at 1,000 feet. The other thing that we did in this ordinance, and I don't remember what the ordinance in 1993 said, I did not bother to look it up. But we did define the designated offender. So it never applied to all sexual offenders. It only applied to what we call designated sexual offenders, which included sexual offenders that had an offense against a child or any person that's required to register under one specific statute, 301.45, that has been designated by a special bulletin notification. And that bulletin notification would get sent to our police department, and then they would be aware that a designated sexual offender that met our ordinance definition was intended to move to Spencer. And if you had a bulletin notification, it was probably because you had, again, an offense against a child or an offense that was violent in nature. And so then we have those 1,000-foot circles around those areas. And when you draw 1,000-foot circles around all the areas in Spencer, you get a map that looks like this, which effectively eliminates almost all residential housing from a designated sexual offender from living according to our ordinance.
That's the goal.
There's a spot here, where there is some exposure for someone to live, and maybe out in this area now. Of course, this area wasn't developed when this ordinance was last made. So then, over the course of the years, we've gotten bulletins occasionally. We've been notified that there is someone like this that would attempt to claim residency in the community, and it was dealt with. It wasn't until just a little while ago, because we get communications from the League of Wisconsin Municipalities quite a bit, that the topic of this particular newsletter came up again. This newsletter was written in 2017. Our ordinance was written in 2016. The amended ordinance was written in 2016. And so, as I said, a lot of communities in the state were following suit and creating these more restrictive ordinances. And it didn't take long before they were challenged in the court. In 2017, the Village of Pleasant Prairie was sued for basically discrimination and what eventually was determined as punitive punishment for sexual offenders. And they did a similar thing. They drew their circles around all the places in Pleasant Prairie, which effectively eliminated any place for a designated sexual offender to live. And so then they were sued and they lost. The judge ruled against them on the grounds that their ordinance was punitive. That they were actually making it a punishment, that you could, part of their punishment for their offense was not being able to live in Pleasant Prairie. And the judge deemed that to be unconstitutional. And so they were ordered to, eventually they just got rid of their ordinance, but it didn't take long then for other communities to start changing their ordinance to try to accommodate the ruling that happened in 2017. And so there were a number of communities, even communities around us, I believe Stratford and Abbotsford, changed their ordinance to try to accommodate the judge's ruling in this case by citing sources, scientific papers that would justify the reasoning behind why the village or the city wanted to prohibit those people from living in those areas. And so when I was reading about this, I did become concerned, and I eventually talked to Dean Dietrich, and I said, is this constitutional? Should we be enforcing this ordinance the way that it's written? Should we be amending the ordinance, or maybe we shouldn't even have this ordinance on the books anymore? There are a lot of communities in the state that don't have this type of ordinance on the books. There are probably more that don't than do. So what he did was he did a review of a number of other sources in addition to this Pleasant Prairie one, and basically came up with the conclusion that our ordinance as written would not survive a lawsuit in the same way that the Pleasant Prairie one did not survive. And his recommendation was actually to abolish the ordinance and just get rid of it.
But we had the lawyers prove what we were doing.
Possibly, I don't remember.
We did.
At that
In
time,
fact, we wanted 1,500 feet. We wanted to
yeah,
try and eliminate every spot. And they said,
but
no.
that was then.
Yeah.
Now,
So,
They challenged it the next year in
Right.
17.
and I don't know if Dean, I didn't specifically ask Dean if he reviewed this ordinance in 2016, but the challenge came in 2017. That's the lawsuit in Pleasant Prairie that was deemed unconstitutional. Since then, he references in his memo another lawsuit in 2021. This is more recent that came to the same conclusion in another community in the state. And basically, he's saying that his recommendation is to eliminate the ordinance because what we're doing with that ordinance is already being done at the state level.
Explain that.
So that's what I have right here is this informational memo that came out in 2021. I believe this was partially in response to that other lawsuit that Dean was referencing. The Wisconsin Legislative Council put together this memo to basically explain how the state registry works and what they are doing to protect people in Wisconsin. And so they do something very similar to what we did, and they basically classify sexual offenders into a couple different categories: serious child sex offenders and sexually violent persons. And in the similar way that we try to do in our ordinance. And so anybody that is in this particular class of sexual offenders has extra things that they have to do besides just registering on the sex offender list. and that includes residency requirements. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. The first thing that you have to do is register. So that gets you on the registry. And many of these offenders in those classes will be on the registry for life. You know, once you get on the registry, you're not coming off the registry. The second thing that it does is pose restrictions on where those offenders may live. Coincidentally, to your comment about 1,500 feet, that's what the registry does for this class of sexual offender. It says you can't live within 1,500 feet from a school, a daycare, a public park, a place of worship, a youth center, if you are a sexual offender that has been convicted of a crime that was deemed to be sexually violent. So it's already doing that.
I know, so our ordinance is even more lax than this, which they can say they can come and beat, but then they have to follow this, which is more strict than our ordinance.
For a very specific reason.
I don't think.
And the reason they can do that is because the state came up with these laws and said they apply at the county level. So each county is required to come up with their circles, just like the Village of Spencer does. And the county draws their circles. They're responsible for placing people on the sexual offender list in residences. They have to find places to put them when they are released from prison. The county does. That's correct. And they have the entire county to choose from. The state has said 1,500 feet is an appropriate distance to be away from those places. And the county has other places that they can put them. So it's not a punishment. You know, the courts wouldn't deem that to be a punishment from the perspective of the county's point of view, because the county has other places that they can place them. If you look at the Village of Spencer and we try to enforce a local ordinance that does exactly the same thing, that would be considered punitive, because now we're not giving them any options. They don't have a choice to live someplace else in Spencer. But the state can enforce that at the county level because the county has options. They can find other places for them to live.
Okay, I get it.
So we don't need to have one.
So we can rely on the state's registry as it was originally intended to provide us with the protection that we're looking for.
So the state would get sued instead of the village.
Right. And the state hasn't gotten sued because at the county level, there is no unconstitutionality in the sense that the county can find other places for them to live. Nobody is saying to the sexual offender that's released that they can't live in Marathon County. Marathon County will find a place for you to live. So that's why it's not deemed to be unconstitutional at that level. And then just so that we're clear, there are other ways that the registry does protect residents. They do have occupational restrictions. So the residency, the restrictions limit like what kind of jobs you can hold. If you are convicted of a child sexual offender crime, you can't be a teacher. You can't work at a daycare. You know, you can't already have these occupations that would put you in contact with children. There are behavioral restrictions. You know, you can't volunteer with the Cub Scouts if you're on the sexual offender list. Things like that. If the nature is serious enough, you might be required for GPS monitoring. All of these things are in place to protect the residents of Spencer as much as any other resident of the state. Those are already in place. So by having it on our books and trying to enforce something locally like this, Dean is afraid that we open ourselves up to potential litigation that we really don't need to expose ourselves to, because we already have basically the same, if not better, protections at the state level.
Like Clark County has provided places for, like Chris said, for places that have to provide a place for them. And if you go take 98 over to Ramaka Road and go down 4 or 5 miles towards Harry Strye's place, maybe you'll see 2 little basically sheds that, like little cabins. And they're just sitting kind of on a field there, right across from the old pit there of Lasky's, I think it is, or something like that. Boogers. And, there's two guys that have lived in there for a long time now. And that was provided by Clark County. They bought the little shed things, and there was an old well there that was functional from an old farm. And they must have bought a chunk of land there. That's where them two guys stay. Problem at this point, but there's Amish kids going by all the time, but you know, it's like, that's how they did it over there, someplace. They probably didn't have.
You're notified anyways, actually.
But now, these are people that are still on probation.
There is a distinction, and our ordinance defines the designated sexual offender in a similar way to what the state registry defines as either a child sexual offender or a violent sexual offender. Our ordinance never prohibited all sexual offenders from living in Spencer. It only ever prohibited child sexual offenders and violent sexual offenders.
But the state does.
The state also only prohibits child sexual offenders and violent sexual offenders from living within that 1,500-foot radius. Sexual offenders that have completed probation, you know, that are released back into society, they have served their time and they're off probation. If they have not been designated as a child sexual offender or as a violent sexual offender, they don't have residency restrictions under our ordinance or under the state rules. And in that case, we don't get notified that that person is going to move to Spencer. We only are notified, Sean is only notified when it's a violent sexual offender or a child sexual offender. The registry is available for anybody to look up, and they can go online and they can check out every community in Wisconsin and find out where every sexual offender that's on the registry has claimed their residence. And
But that's one thing I recommend on that point is I see a lot of police departments, communities putting that link on our webpage. That we can access it that way too.
yeah, if you felt that was
We got any in
appropriate.
town?
We have a few in town.
You live outside those circles?
No one,
Not on probation.
there are no sexual offenders in town right now that I'm aware of that are either child sexual offenders or violent sexual offenders that would be restricted from living in Spencer by either the state or the local ordinance that we have in place right now.
You might have sexual offenders, but
Right. And I mean,
that could even be on ankle thing.
I'm guessing not. If you've been,
Supposed to have.
Yeah, you gotta be on probation.
yeah, if you're on the GPS monitor, it's because the state has concern that you are,
And then
So.
if they're not, sorry, I was gonna say, if they're not following those compliance rules of
Yeah.
the ankle monitor and reporting where they're at, state usually contacts me saying, hey, Sean, this guy is living here, but that is not his address. So we go out, investigate, get complaints out of the person, and if it's a real problem, we'll send a report to the district attorney for not filing with the SOR group. So that's how that would work.
So what you're really asking us is to eliminate that ordinance as far as the village.
that
Well, that's what-
I'm saying that that's what Dean has recommended.
Dean Dietrich has
Yeah.
suggested as our
Yeah,
attorney.
it makes sense. Then we don't have to worry about it. I mean, we have to worry
Well,
about it.
that's my
but-
point.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanna make sure that everybody understands the logic. And, you know, this exact pamphlet will be here in my office. If there's a resident that comes in the office and says, hey, I heard you guys are going lax on sexual offenders, you know, I'm happy to explain the same thing to anybody that comes in the office. I think that we are as protected, if not more protected by the state statute
Sounds like it.
than we are by the
500
local
feet.
ordinance. And we are protected against, you know, a lawsuit.
No, I get it. It's no brainer.
So I don't see a problem.
I would ask for then is a motion, to draft a resolution, abolishing our local sex offender residency requirement ordinance.
Make the motion.
Been moved by Bill,
Second.
second by Jeremy. Need a roll call, just, all
Oh, all eyes.
in favor of this resolution,
Aye.
opposed? Motion carried.
I don't know that I'll have that by November, but certainly by December. I'll have it.
Ready?
Yep.
Item B, discussion of possible action on the creation of a new anti-bullying ordinance.
Well, actually, Sean, and Tim Kozar brought this into the office, a few weeks ago. What they were looking for is something that they could use at the level of the school, that would give, Tim some teeth without having to rely on state laws, harassment laws that would escalate a situation to, you know, actually a crime. What we have in our ordinance in chapter 359 is a spot where we adopt a bunch of criminal codes that are in state statutes. And all the way down to the bottom of page 2 is a section where we adopt the state's harassment code. And harassment would be great for an adult situation, but not so great for you know, a kid up at the school when we're dealing with a minor. And Tim's got an issue of bullying that he needs to address up there. He wants to be able to escalate the situation beyond, you know, a detention. The school might issue, but he doesn't necessarily want to go all the way to harassment. So what he would like us to do is to consider creating a bullying policy. There is I guess I did get a little thorough here. I've got our harassment, where we adopt the idea of the harassment criminal offense, and then the violations and penalties that would be associated with those charges. And that's what I really wanted to do here, was indicate that there's really nowhere in this violation and penalty section where we can choose, you know, I mean, you can choose depending on the nature of the harassment, maybe a misdemeanor or a felony, but there really isn't a method in the ordinance that can be easily applied to a child. And then the penalty associated with harassment in our ordinance ends up being a $25 to $1,000 fine. And then potential jail time, even for a first offense, which again is a little extreme for a child. Chapter 947 is actually the state's definition of harassment in the state code. Again, doesn't give you a lot of options when dealing with children. On page 29 then is Village of Pewaukee, Waukesha County's ordinance that they drafted just this year to deal with bullying. So this is offered as an example of an ordinance that we could reference, where they're defining bullying and harassment. Harassment they're defining similarly to what state statute does, but they're adding that bullying definition, which again does have some overlap with harassment. Includes a little bit more, because the bullying definition that they come up with includes verbal, physical, written, electronic means of action that's reasonably likely to intimidate, harass, emotionally abuse, slander, etc. Where state statutes actually have different regulations for things that you do with electronic communication, phones versus computers and that sort of thing. So they're kind of trying to wrap all of that up into that definition of bullying. And then what they have is just basically saying it's prohibited. You're not allowed to engage in activity that we have defined as bullying. And that a couple extra little things here will say you're not allowed to retaliate against somebody who reports a violation of the ordinance. And of course, this doesn't affect constitutionally protected activity. So it's not intended to be an impingement on someone's constitutional rights. They put that in there as a proactive way of communicating that. In section E, we get to parental responsibility, which this is really where that intermediate step in between, dealing with it at the school level and dealing with it as a crime comes into effect. The ordinance requires parental responsibility. Anybody that's under 18 years of age, the custodial parent or guardian is not allowed to allow that child to violate the bullying ordinance. And then there is a warning that's issued by writing from law enforcement. So you can write a letter to the parent saying your child has engaged in this type of activity that's prohibited by ordinance. It needs to stop. If it doesn't stop, there's the potential to move on to that penalty phase. And in this particular ordinance, they've defined a first penalty as $100, $250 for a second offense, and $400 for a subsequent offense. We could do something similar. We could come up with different dollar amounts. Back up in our code, when we talk about penalties, we're very broad. We say $25 to $1,000 for a first offense. This certainly falls within that range, but we could be more specific in the bullying ordinance or less specific. And that's really it. This is a very simple ordinance. They just adopted it this year. When I talked to the clerk in Pewaukee, they said that was the same thing. Their police came to their office and asked for an ordinance like this to help them deal with bullying at the school level. Anything to add, Sean?
No, you covered it perfect.
In the same way, if this was something that the board was interested in, I'd ask for a motion to approve a resolution to adopt a bullying ordinance like this. And I would come to the, again, maybe not November, but maybe December meeting with a draft ordinance for you guys to consider.
I'll make a motion to direct the clerk to enact a anti-bullying policy for the village of Spencer.
Not to enact the policy, but
To draft.
To draft. Yep.
Second. Second, by Al. All in favor, say aye. Opposed?
This would be probably put in their student handbook, right? Or the handbook that the schools give out.
I can certainly.
So that they're in the loop
Ordinance
with the school district is in the loop with us.
It's,
Fine.
Yeah, I would imagine that they would wanna.
Yeah. I don't know if you've talked to them about the ordinance. Thought it was a good idea or anything like that, but
we haven't discussed it with the school a lot.
yeah.
This was more on Tim's experience.
I think when Tim was in here in the office talking about it, it was like, there are a lot of things that he would like to be able to act on, but that doesn't necessarily happen on school grounds. So there's another issue where the school doesn't have the authority to do anything about an activity. And if Tim wanted to do something about that activity, now it's criminal. So this is just a tool that he can use to kind of thread that needle between, trying to help a kid out by stopping that activity and changing some behaviors before escalating to a criminal offense.
Under item C, Discussion possible action on the creation of a new sporting range regulation ordinance.
This is a very short one. Sean came to me the other day and said, you know, we got a new shooting range out there. What do we have on the books to enforce, some very basic rules, related to the shooting range? He brought in this, ordinance from Athens, which basically just, defines the times that the range is gonna be open. And then, just some very general range rules. I think Sean was looking for something that he could use, right out of the gate if somebody is, certainly if they're at the range at the wrong time, creating a nuisance noise or, he can just say, hey, it's past time.
So
You
there-
gotta get out.
Yeah, this is very broad. I would have a lot more rules than that.
So,
Um,
yeah, and that's, what I'm thinking, and I'm guessing what Athens does is, they have a very specific set of rules in their ordinance that they're using to allow their police to respond to complaints and to make sure that there's not anything major going on out there. The actual range rules that we will have will be much, much more
Yeah.
extensive than this.
right,
But I don't know that we want to put all those
No,
rules
I
in
don't
an
think you do.
ordinance form. Those can be policy, those can be, range rule.
range rules is
The range.
for the
for the
range.
Yeah,
Right, yeah,
but Sean would be able, because, and I mean, technically, we will define the shooting range as a park, as one of the parks in the village's system. We already have, hours of operations for the parks, but, we don't, we want to be a little bit more restrictive as far as that goes. And especially when it comes to daylight for shooting.
And I would ask the board, I mean, do you agree with those hours or is there something different we'd like to see?
so I would. I don't like the arbitrary number or the, arbitrary months. Because they could, they're taking rifle season right out of the woodwork. I mean, they're not letting you shoot in October.
So what would you like to say?
I would like to say, from basically, it's closed after the first snowfall because we don't want to plow that thing. We don't want to be out there plowing that range. We don't want to,
Could be before deer season.
it could be, but if it snows before the deer season, it snows. I mean, we just don't want to have to maintain it. We're gonna tear that all up with plows. You're gonna hit things and yeah, I don't think we want to be plowing that. But, open it up. You pick it, I mean, if you could pick it up from,
Well, in fact, I don't think that they are restricting times. They have specific times, April through
April
September,
through September, so
and then October through March. So is to my knowledge, their range is never closed seasonally. It's open year round. So they are actually,
Oh, I didn't see the second
they
part.
are
I didn't
actually
see
doing snow removal
yes,
activities.
they
out
are,
there.
I didn't see the second, sorry.
And again, this ordinance is presented as an example.
Sure,
I'd entertain a similar motion where, we get direction to come back with an ordinance and then
yeah.
before we even come back with this ordinance, we will have an opportunity to have a Parks Committee meeting where we will be going through all of the rules.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, I guess I'd leave it open, dusk to dawn. I don't want to be snow plowing in there. We're gonna hit things.
Yeah, no, I mean.
That's a really small space in there already. And we're gonna run plows through there, and you're gonna have to use probably the front end loader, or we're gonna tear the shit out of the place.
yeah, you wouldn't go in there with anything but the
That's the only thing you,
550.
I don't know how you get that cleared out, because if you're gonna open it, that means clearing walkways, it means clearing the handicapped access points up to the range benches, all that's gotta be
Yeah.
compliance with
Yeah.
ADA, so once it snows, for just ease, I'd say, we're done till
Yeah.
fall, so, and we can do maintenance and crap, but, close to the public, because if we're not closed and we're open, then we have to have the handicap, and that's the other thing, is you gotta have the handicap stuff. Cause all has to be open, it has to be accessible, and so that means snow plowing that ramp, getting
Yeah.
all of that clean, get it salted.
Well, you would treat it no different than say this municipal park,
Yeah,
if,
but I mean, and that's every time it snows, I'm just seeing the dollars
yeah.
click off my head of how much it's gonna take to maintain this. I'm
I'm hoping, I'm imagining in my head, perhaps the group that
Oh,
like
I can see that,
together to donate.
I can see that.
And if they want to maintain the park and.
Yeah,
And do
and that's,
snow
and that,
plowing
if
and
we
do
can
lawn
long-term,
mowing.
in the long term, when we could get a group of citizens that wanna, you know, help maintain it, great, then we can amend the ordinance to say whatever, but in the beginning, I think we gotta limit our liability and the waste of money that we're gonna have, because we're already, till we get some cash coming in.
Yeah.
We're just, you know, we're strapped already, I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just I don't wanna plow it.
Right, I get it.
I don't wanna have to maintain in the winter, because I said, if you do that now, you have to maintain it for everybody. So little Jimmy that's in a wheelchair and wants to go shooting with dad, we gotta clear all that out and salt it and sand it, and now he falls down.
Right.
Dad falls down, taking him out to shoot. Yeah, it's just a big mess. I mean, if you're, yeah, a lot of ranges close in the winter. These just because of the expense.
Yeah, I get it.
Mhm.
Chris, you wanna look for what?
Similar thing where we just get direction to draft a resolution creating an ordinance.
As long as it's on here,
Mhm.
paper targets only, not people bring a shepherd hook.
I think
Or just
well, that
leave
would,
it
I
for now.
will, I
Leave
would
it for now.
leave it for now, but I'm thinking we have some kind of master target that we leave out there, and but we can address that with the range rules, I think. For the ordinance, that would appear probably be pretty broad, it's basically hours of operation. Nothing that explodes when you shoot it.
Yeah, I think that's,
Yeah,
I like the
that's in-
fact that do they call?
Yeah, it's in there.
Generating?
Nothing that explodes and, you know,
Yeah.
shooting outside the berm,
Oh,
the bermed area would be the real easy basic.
yeah, no alcohol consumption, I think. is-
So alcohol is, yeah, that's fine. But yeah, just real basic. We don't need anything crazy, just real basic rules, because the range rules will be different from the ordinance.
The berms are too high to throw my beer can.
What if a real pigeon fly?
You can't shoot a real pigeon either.
No shooting the
Unless it's
wild,
inside.
no shooting the wildlife.
When we shoot trap and loyal, there's deer out there where we're shooting towards, but don't get to them. And they just stand there.
So when you do draft it, Chris, I would love you to make sure we have the no exploding targets and the wildlife ordinance.
We'll have a Parks Committee.
Yeah, cause there's, I mean, we got,
There's a lot to unwrap there, but
That's a
in
meeting.
the ordinance, I said you
we
have
got
to.
range rules. I mean, you said little Jimmy in a wheelchair. What if little Jimmy wants to go out there by himself
Right.
as a minor? I
Right.
mean, it's all something that we gotta look
Right.
at.
Yeah, DNR has
DNR has
a
rules.
draft rules that we are gonna start with and then be able to add on.
Yeah, just the basics, they said, what they have, and then the only thing I would add to theirs is, you know, no firing at wildlife.
Sure.
Because you're gonna have birds dead because someone thought it was gonna be fun to shoot at it.
Yeah, that would be a
And
good.
shooting, like, and keeping it, I mean, just the basics, keep it inside the berm walls, no shooting at, I mean, some basic things.
He's always good with you.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing I was concerned about is if they have to be too early. I don't know if there'll be disgruntled people about the noise up there.
Well,
It's no different from the wildlife area right next to it. Across the street, you can shoot there from dawn to dusk,
all year long.
all year long.
So a vampire.
And if that,
If you have a
once the dusk
for
is
something.
good, then.
That's what most of them are dawn to dusk. It makes it easy.
Mhm.
Then there's no questioning, well, I got one more minute I could shoot.
Right.
Well, sunset to sunrise to sunset.
Yeah,
Very easy stuff.
I mean, motion.
Someone make one?
no.
I'll make a motion.
Second. Moved and seconded to instruct Chris to create a resolution.
Yep.
All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. That brings us to letter D. Getting into closed session. We're gonna read all that.
You should read it.
I will read
I
it.
apologize, but you should read it.
Enter into closed session per Wisconsin statute 19.851 considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility.
Move.
Move in second to go into executive session. Don't need a roll call, do
Do
we?
you take all eyes for that?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're in executive session.
Second.
Pause over on the
Yeah.
left. Click off the other window. Okay.
At this time, we are now back in open session. I need a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried and we are out of here.
Now I can.